selling is not the secret of running an organization such as ours. What's important is ideas. Are you putting forth ideas? Are they the right ideas to move a population? Otherwise, you're wasting your time. And you're wasting the time of people who are trying to raise money from. Therefore, you have to think, concentrate on ideas, concentrate on discussion of ideas, increase the activity of discussion of relevant ideas, increase the general participation of the entire organization throughout in a common discussion of ideas. Use that as a stimulant, and then take the things we do have to do, like this campaign, that campaign, this issue, that issue, and run campaigns. Whether educational campaigns on an issue, political campaigns, it's much the same thing, and you find you will change the character of your income. My concern, on the other hand, is seeing what I see here. If the change doesn't occur, as it would happen if we didn't make the change in the U.S., you've got a disaster on your hands, a building disaster. So forget all this, usual business-like kind of operation. Yeah, run a neat business, do straight accounting. Be careful how you do things. But don't try to run it on advice from business. I remember this, we had this bunch of assholes across the river over there. Yeah. The business school. Find out what they teach and make sure you never do it.
You stopped so suddenly then.
Well, I completed what I had to say.
Oh.
Which might stir something up. But sometimes it takes time for the pot to come to a boil.
Concerning the United States, why is it that despite the credit system and despite the presidential system, we have so many oligarchs in the United States?
We don't really have that many.
No, it's barons and drafts.
Yeah, we don't. What we see, there's a difference in the European thing. You don't have the idea of oligarchy. You have people who are oligarchs, in a sense, but you don't have the idea of oligarchy in the population. Some guy comes in and says, he's farmed so-and-so farm what? So what? The guy may be an oligarch, but to an American, he's just an asshole. As I said, in France, in Germany is obvious. Germany is a humiliated country on this respect. I mean, you look at Bild Zeitung. How could Bild Zeitung exist? I mean, there are other dirty newspapers. The British are very good at this. But Bild Zeitung, there is nothing lower than Bild Zeitung.
Where did it come from, Where did it come from, though?
It's an old tradition in Germany.
Yeah, but it also has a specific thing that it was. I mean, this whole Springer operation.
Oh, sure.
Was somehow part of this.
Look back at
the other side of the 68, so
look at the 1960s. I mean, 1920s, for example. Look at the press in Germany in the 1920s. It was so filthy that even the Germany of the modern Germany, later of post-war Germany, outlawed it. You cannot call a pig if it has two legs. And this was done to protect the oligarchs and people who are critical of their animal qualities. No, the problem is that in France you have a different type. In France it comes with a certain puckering of the lips. And the types I mentioned. Look, in France, the oligarchy is the It's the political arm of the police. It's an oligarchical country. De Gaulle tried to change that in his own way. De Gaulle had an oligarchical credential himself, but he actually was a patriot who came to the point of trying to change the country. And it took a hell of a lot of effort on the part of Mitterrand and other pigs, using the word pig advisably, to destroy the France that de Gaulle tried to make. And it was even being destroyed while he was still president. After '83, France was being destroyed. And the introduction of the education reform in France in 1963 was the beginning of the end of French culture, even before de Gaulle was out. And you see the kind of piggery from the 1970s on, which destroyed France. It's oligarchy. Italy is oligarchical. You have two oligarchies. You don't know which is the more criminal, the black nobility or the mafia. It's an oligarchy. People are terrified of the oligarchy. The fascism in Italy is still based to this day on the oligarchy. They treat this crazy Mussolini as an oligarch. She's nothing but a pig, but they treat her as an oligarch. She's a fascist pig by profession. So that's the problem. In the United States, there is the idea of a social class as being a hereditary social class as an oligarchy does not exist in the minds of the people. The form of that oligarchy exists, especially around financial circles and organized crime, which is, of course, the imports from Britain, so we don't have the same problem. But we do it. Europe has this problem, and the problem is in the mind. To be a prisoner in fact is one thing. To be imprisoned by your own mind is another thing.
Yeah.
Europeans have been imprisoned by their own mind.
That's a very, very important point, because we've had many discussions here on why people did not understand the youth movement. So why? Because they did not understand what the oligarchy is, the principle of oligarchy. Because they identify it to persons outside themselves. It's something that spreads inside, in the minds, in the behaviors, in the families, throughout the whole life that we had. I have a certain insight in it, but actually different from other people, because I was born in Argentina, where there are a lot of oligarchs, but they are called the Spaniards.
Yeah.
So, or the French. They say, as dirty as a Frenchman. This is the same. As dirty as a Frenchman. So we have all these things. So in France, if you look at what the oligarch is, and I was looking in a certain way, if I'm not pessimistic, but if I was pessimistic, I would say that we are on the verge of losing the youth movement. But I'm optimistic, so I said we are on the verge of having a youth movement that we did not yet have. So what it means? If you look at these people, they underestimate themselves. Even this youth, between now, they are not so young. They are between 23, she's the youngest, I think, between or about. No, they are fortunately new ones and her. So how old are they as an average? Between 23 and 29.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these people already are paralyzed by this oligarchy, which is mediated by the teacher, the professor, the one who knows. So the oligarchical principle is that you don't question yourself. You have not that right. So if you don't question yourself, how can you intervene in others? You are paralyzed toward the others. And that's oligarchy. And there is what I see in Germany, in France, in Italy, in the different forms, as different from the American principle, which is, in a sense, not only the United States, it's also, in a certain way, in an inferior way, countries in Ibero-America. Because they're inferior, I said, because they have been hit by this Spanish Hispanidad principle that a lot of people here know about, because they have indirect or direct knowledge of it into the last 10 years. So, what I see that we have absolutely what you said. We have absolutely to bring back an European organization. At this point, it doesn't exist, no more than the youth movement in France. We have to make it exist and know it and understand it as something which is based in the future, in our future. And in that sense, we have to bring back this mental life in our relations. And I was reading something by Humboldt on the sense of the Greeks that they had of impulse, intention, or lunging. Lunging, you say?
Yeah, right.
That. And that's what we need in an active way. Because if not, if we are not truthful in that way, if we develop the universe as a knowledge of particulars, what happens, and I see that even in the youth movement in France, what we do know, or we pretend to know, becomes an impediment instead of a power. A blocking point instead of a power. Because we believe that we know things that we don't. So it becomes this block. So to show to the others that we are truthful in what we do, we have to have this irony of putting ourselves into question. And I think this meeting should be a portion of it. If not, we are going to have an European organization under that name, but it will be a conglomerate of biotopes. And even it will affect the youth movement.
Yeah, I know. You see some of the effects of that in the youth movement here. You have a certain degree of hesitancy about authority, determining authority that you don't have in the United States. I mean, the fact that you believe that you're free or should be free, or don't you? If you believe that you're free and should be free, then you act as an individual. You act as a sovereign person. But if you think somehow that you have to be accountable to some mysterious agency or influence, authority, you have to be accountable to public opinion, for example, which is the baby boomer thing. That's sophistry. Anyone and that's the same problem we have in the United States and here. The problem here is that the coloring, and people don't realize, they don't understand culture functionally. Because we have people who accepted Cartesian ways of thinking about problems. And therefore they think of everything in terms of a Cartesian mechanistic system. Well, I'm not influenced. Bullshit, you're not influenced. The fact that you say you're not influenced by something means that you are. Because you're not acknowledging the truth. You're hiding from yourself the reality of the situation, therefore you are influenced. Your influence, your evidence is what you deny that is true, proves that you're controlled. Now, in point of fact, I go through this because of my long family history. Not merely personally, but because of the peculiarities of my family history. I know, look what I got, you know what I come from, right? You have this French-Canadian side to it, which is arrived about 1648 in Quebec. Whole boatloads of us, or a few boatloads. And some of them are manifest here.
There is a biography on your family of the Gautier family in internet now, from the 1670s.
Well, my family actually goes back much earlier in the United States. It goes back, actually, in the United States to about 1630. Maybe there was something before that. I don't know what the Portuguese were doing because they were becoming Indians. No, the Portuguese were going back and forth across the Atlantic. They were going there for fish, cod. And they would sail the cod, they would take the currents. They'd take the current, they'd go up to the northern coast of Massachusetts, England, into Canada, and they would catch cod. Now what they would do is they would go into the woods, they would make the kegs out of wood. They would get salt by taking seawater and collecting the salt from the seawater. And they would then take the codfish, they would put the codfish out in the sun, strips, to cure it. They'd salt it down, they put it in the kegs, they seal the kegs, and then 2 years or so later, they would go back to Portugal with all these kegs of codfish, which they would sell throughout Europe. So they were there. So when the Pilgrims landed at Provincetown, they landed at a settlement, Portuguese settlement, and they went to the coast of Massachusetts, where they met some Portuguese who had become Indians, and they had no trouble understanding each other because they all spoke European languages. So I don't know. I don't think I have any knowledge of that. There is an Abenaki Indian trace in my probably French ancestry. They were doing those kinds of things. But but then you look at it, it goes back to that. And I can, because of this, I can trace the influences I find inside myself back these hundreds of years as specific traces, as family characteristics, cultural characteristics which exist. And therefore, if you come from a country which has an oligarchical tradition, go back a number of generations, you probably find out where some of these things come from. There are habits which are passed on with mother's milk from one generation to the next. And they exist. So when you live in a culture, it's not mechanistic. Don't think of it as mechanistic. It doesn't come by because somebody told you something now. It's not a mechanistic piece of crap stuck into you. What you react to is a tension, what takes the form of a tension in your environment. And this tension is a cultural process, dynamic and characteristic in the literal sense of dynamic, which is passed on from generation to generation. And if you want to understand any process, as I dealt with this process of, take the case of Rohatyn in this paper today, often people don't know who they are. Or worse, they don't even know what they are. But they're conditioned by a process, and they react in a way that you have to look back some generations to find out where this came from. They don't know where they got it. So it's not a conscious adoption of something they discussed with somebody and then accepted the idea. If you're in an oligarchical culture, you're in it. And you are conditioned by an oligarchical culture. You can't say, I'm not an oligarch. I'm not a baby boomer. If you're in the baby boomer generation, you're a baby boomer. Because all the cultural interplay that came in producing the baby boomer generation is in you. The specific things, the changes. Think in any part of the world. Yes, there were differences in different parts of the world. But the baby boomer generation, if you find the difference between the Eastern European German, or the German and East Germany, and the German and West Germany. The German and East Germany had a nightmare of its own. But the West Germans were all brainwashed by the Congress for Cultural Freedom. Look at the number of people who had certain attitudes about the Frankfurt School, for example, existentialism, which is at all the universities. You find, for example, by the 68 turn, the shock effect of 68 unleashed all these tendencies which had been buried there before. You had an explosion of change in the German culture. But the change was already being prepared. The change came because the baby boomer generation reached maturity. And when it reached maturity, and it then took the conditioning of itself and expressed that as an adult influence, then you had the adult baby boomer generation. And it was orchestrated. Why do you think they ran the damn Vietnam War? It was not done to conquer Vietnam, it was to orchestrate. The whole history of world since the death of Roosevelt, has been the campaign of the international oligarchy to try to eliminate the Roosevelt tradition and to eliminate the United States. And how do you eliminate a powerful nation, which was then the most powerful nation on the planet? By attacking it? No. By corrupting it. How do you corrupt it? You do it the same way the cult of Apollo, the Delphi cult of Apollo, destroyed the Greeks. By sophistry. And everything that was acceptable. You're an authoritarian personality. I don't believe in conspiracies. These kinds of statements, you're talking to a zombie. See, you don't believe in conspiracies. What kind of a zombie are you? I don't expect conspiracy theories. What kind of a zombie are you? These kinds of things are the things you have to look for. This is real politics. Is look for the dynamic aspect of cultural transmission. Think of yourself. What are you? Look, the human race probably has been on this planet, who knows, 1 million, 2 million years. That's a human race. Well, have we made some progress? Has there been changes? From a population that had a population potential of 2 to 3 million living persons at most, to now over 6 billion. Wasn't there a little change there someplace? Didn't this go in steps, increments? Weren't these changes cultural changes? So the fact that you could live today as an individual in a population, world population of over 6 billion people, means that you have absorbed 1 million years or so of culture. Successive changes in culture. They're all inside you. And therefore, look at that. Don't block it out. Don't try to come up with explanations of why this ain't so. It is so. If you're a baby boomer, you're a baby boomer. Don't deny it. Just say I'm a recovering baby boomer.
No, I think what you said about this brainwashing, I mean, ironically, it came back to me while reading, all authors do a little piece of Hannah Arendt. But as she goes through, how this was actually the 68ers movement was this worldwide movement. And it had different formations in all the countries that made it fit to the ideology. Because for us in Germany, it was of course always a problem, and it is still, that we all said, okay, every single one of us can, tell, I had so and so many teachers who were all Nazis. We had this and that. We were sitting around the table with our parents at dinner, and telling them, what have you been doing? Why did you not stand up? And they were like, oh, we didn't know, we did, all this kind of stuff. And, the kind of motivation to become political, at least for me, was very much that I thought, okay, I'll do everything that I will not have children sitting at the dinner table and posing such questions to me. But, I think we really have to get this very clear, that, for instance, in the 68ers movement in France, you had a very different justification also why it would be. In Sweden, which was neutral in the war, even, you had the same movement going on everywhere. So that is somehow, this irony is something I think we have to be aware of much more, because otherwise, as you mentioned, Bildzeitung, the 68ers, what were they doing? Running, the demonstrations against the Springer Press in Berlin, as big spearhead of the mobilization. But I think this kind of orchestration, from above, that one has that really totally clear. And I think that also has to do a lot, or has to go together with what Jacques said, in reactivating the European organization as a European organization, which means, to me, it all begins with talking to each other. That's a good one.
Remember what the 68ers were doing at the time they were protesting at Springer Press? They were jumping into beds where they weren't. They thought the pornography was competing with their lust.
In Denmark, we've been having this quite exciting development, actually. That in the last period, we've been seeing that it's actually quite possible to recruit young people. The funny thing we always also seen is that if these Danes are in Denmark, they get recruited, they go outside of Denmark, and they perform great. Then they come back to Denmark, and in very short time they fall apart.
There's something rotten in the state of Denmark.
There's definitely something rotten in the state of Denmark. We call it Danish culture. And this oligarchical principle, this social control is so extreme. And we've been battling a little bit with it from the standpoint, we want to have this youth movement in Denmark. We want to have a Danish youth movement. A lot of youth in Denmark. So when can we get a little bit, and then maybe we can have it. But I actually, over the last couple of weeks, has kind of come to the conclusion that this is going to take some time. Being a Dane, you get so brainwashed that in order to recover your mind from the Danish ideology, you cannot do it by being abroad maybe for 3 months. This takes time. Sometimes you might have to be outside Denmark for several years in order to be able to go back into the sewer without being pulled down. So, from the standpoint also of what Jacques says, that we have a European campaign, for me it makes totally sense. We have all of, it's like we've just we're so few people, and we go out and we kind of just been scratching the surface. And by these activities, we recruit people. And this is also why I had this idea. Now we have to go to mass outreach. We have to have a pamphlet out and 50,000 copies as the first thing, and we have to have more coming. So we get simply getting into contact with more people. Because out there, when we get into contact with people and we present to them the drama of today, they're perfectly recruitable. Under the condition that we then take them out of Denmark. and send them to Berlin, send them somewhere else. They get into the youth movement, they can do marvelous things, and
we will give you a Bezirk in Berlin. That's kind of
no, but so I think that you really it's this I mean and you really have to be. This doesn't go away with age either, unfortunately. It's not like you get cured permanently, and it's a heavy fight to not being controlled by the impotence of your national ideology.
I think this is in Germany in particular a problem, because we are so brainwashed with this Hitler thing that anything, when you stand up for leadership, when you go for a vision, you are attacked as a cult. And I very much remember this whole discussion in the beginning of the youth movement here, this whole discussion, this kind of, wow, how are we going to do this, how are we going to handle this, and then the question of Lynn, of Helga, the whole question of leadership. This is really, I think, in particular, in Germany, the biggest problem. And one of the big problems, but a real big one, yeah. Because if you think about what this country, did to others, but what people got subjected to in this whole Nazi period and then the whole period after that, it's just something we also have to deal with. And I don't think that it's something which the others have, but it's inside ourselves. So, that's a real problem. In Germany, in the German organization, which people are really taking leadership and making points to say, this has to be done, and I want this to be discussed. This is our action, this is our perspective, this is what we want to do, and this is completely lacking. Face it, it's really there. And I know how difficult it is, especially if you don't have the social process of interaction, and this really has to be restored. But that's something which I think one really has to be clear about. Because it's not a matter of just sitting together and chatting and having your agreements and doing things this way or doing it the other way. But there has to be a vision, and people have to stand up and fight for it. And be willing to stick out their heads and, be socially isolated, I don't know what. But so what? What? So these are the kind of things which have to be very open. Yeah? And I think this really is something, in particular in Germany, in that sense, I think it's the weakest part of the organization in all of Europe. Germany is very, very weak as an organization. If it were not for the youth movement, and if it were not for the future orientation, which finally we are getting with this. But there are so many things which people have different opinions about, how to approach things like the EU question, the Euro, the youth organizing. I don't know what. All sorts of things, and they just have to be discussed and thought out and resolved because they are important. They are important for humanity. And I really call on everybody to really put the things on the table which you disagree with. And I think we should actually go for find out a way to really move forward.
Well, I think what Lynn put on the table, we need to discuss and not go from one subject to the other, because Lynn has put something on the table which is, not said the first time, but it's nevertheless pretty breathtaking, that we are in the final months before the financial system collapses, maybe before September, in September or around this period. We are faced with a potential terrorism which all experts, confirm likelihood of the World Cup. And as long as Cheney is not out, the danger that this will lead to a total chaos. Now, this is a big subject, and I don't think that everybody is totally, in reality, because if the people would not have a certain amount of denial, then you would be willing to discuss what we have to do. And what we have to do, I think we have to do exactly what they're doing in the United States, which, you think that it was easy, but it was not easy, but it was possible to double the income practically, in a very short period of time. And how did they do it? Steve Douglas just said, okay, we have to focus on this mission. And, they changed the organizing. They did change the organizing. People developed their own list of contacts. They did much more outreach. And, every nest which was resisting this has changed, what Lynn was saying. When I'm trying to discuss here the fact that, everybody knows the income in the last weeks and months was always below 50, 49, 48, 51. When we know we need 65, you can somehow be clear when this thing is going to bust. So when I raise the issue, we have to somehow, find a way of getting it up. You cannot discuss it because people who have whatever prejudices or other opinions in the world, they just sit there and be quiet. And that is an intolerable situation because, I fully agree with what Jacques was saying that, the way France is going, you could have a civil war and a collapse of the country, but don't think that this is not the case for Germany. If you look at the eruption of violence which is now occurring, which admittedly is blown up by the media for their own purposes, but it is there. If you look what happened with this 16-year-old running amok in Berlin, that is just a symptom of a collapsing society. And we have in Germany an absolutely decadent, dying society which only we can change. So if we want to change this, we have to be much more serious on the question of youth recruitment. The youth has a big constraint by a lack of fund. It is a big psychological wear. Because if you have to worry if you are going to have your dinner, if you worry if you have only one lousy car, if you worry. Now we are end of May, and we said we wanted to have 1 million copy of literature in Berlin until September. Well, if we continue with the present rate, I don't think we are going anywhere close to this. We already lost 2 full months since we made this decision, and we are still at 60,000. Which is not adequate. So therefore, I said we have to find a way of addressing this question, of increasing the outreach. And I frankly want to put on the table that we do it in Europe in the same way like they're doing in the US, that we have certain national campaign tasks as a priority, and that is a thing we have to absolutely get, and then comes the rest. Now when I say this, then some people say I'm committing euthanasia against old people, which I really think is a crazy idea, and I hope it was a temporary outbreak of insanity to think this way. But people are not willing anymore. Biotopes. We have a collection of biotopes. We used to have a European organization where you say, okay, we make now a European mobilization, and then people would all pull in one direction. Now people make their own agendas. They do whatever they please. There is no public common discussion, and I think we will have to change this, because we are too important in world history to let it go one other day. And I think we should, and I want to put this up for discussion. I know people probably disagree with it, but then let's discuss it. I really think we should put butter by the fish and make the kinds of changes which are necessary. Butter by the fish. New idiom.
We in Munich, we discussed after this famous conference call how to get out of this mess, and now we have this quota of 9,000 per week, and we figured out that it's quite a challenge because we are very few people. So we set the task, we say, okay, the field operation, which is only 2 or 3 people per day, should take aim to raise 1,000 of this 9,000. Only to get a first assessment how to get the money really in hand. And this is also clear, you don't get €1,000 per week with selling single newspapers, but that means you have to get subscriptions, memberships at the book table, and this is a challenge. But it's possible. So we were the last 2 weeks with the field always above 600, so it's not 1,000, but we are approaching. We have last week we had I think 3 subscriptions and 1 membership. This week 2 subscriptions and 1 membership. It's not enough, but so we're fighting for that. And this is the one point that I think every region should take this quota of 65,000 real and discuss internally how to get the money into the hand. The second point is I made the last weeks a budget for the youth here in Leipzig and Berlin. And so we have monthly operational costs about 20,000, 21,000. When we want to give every organizer like €50 per week stipends, plus offices, telephones, and so forth. Because in the last year, at least, they were lucky if they have €10 per week or 5. I don't know.
10 per month.
10 per month, yeah. Yeah, somehow it's just a wonder how they survive. Okay, so this is one of the challenges when we want to have the Spearhead, the campaign, big, then we have to finance the youth and the literature as the first priority. And additionally, we have to find, as Lynn said, the central costs, we have to finance the local costs. And so my idea is, for example, that we have one special account for the youth, where every region, or let's say the big regions, the north, Ruhr, Hessen, and the south, gives like...
Bigger than Dresden.
Bigger than Dresden and Berlin. Okay. Yeah, we are all small.
We are all small.
Yeah.
Okay.
But small is not beautiful. So the idea is that, the necessity is that, for example, if we want to get to this level of about €20,000 per month, that at least these 4 regions have to contribute like 4,000 for this purpose per month, or 1,000 per week, plus those funds going to Wiesbaden and so forth. And but this has to be a priority. Otherwise, we can forget everything else. And I think we should discuss this, that we get a decision to fight for the quota and get a political campaign running forefront, and then raise additional funds as side effects.
Lynn, I have a question. I mean, I totally agree with what you said. Politics is ideas, is creativity. And I have a question with respect to the North. because there is, since now some years, a very heavy slander campaign against Hanover. I don't know why. I mean, you mentioned first in a memo that Hanover, we were not talking about Dina and me, but about Hanover, all the members in the North, they are a center of gossip. Then in the next memo, you even described Hanover as a, I first didn't know what this word even meant, eine Eiterbeule. I still blocked the English word. And I mean, I studied medicine, and one doesn't have to study medicine. Eine Eiterbeule sollte man ausschneiden. One has to cut a pus, what's the word? Passbaul has to be cut out. And there were other memos which I even don't want to mention. So I don't know why, and if you have some thoughts that maybe I do something wrong in the North, why you never discuss it with me? Instead, I don't know, put some burden on membership, which does, since years, very good work, and so I don't understand it, and I think I and the members have a right to understand you, why you say so.
I agree with one thing. I think that most people in the organization, members throughout the organization, really have no idea of what actually is going on in the leadership circles of the organization. So therefore, it's not surprising that people would be mystified, whereas they would not be mystified if they knew exactly what the discussion was in the ranks of the leadership, including with me. Now, you know there were certain meetings here that you participated in, which were heated meetings, and I was right, and you were wrong, because the situation was obvious to me. And it's...
You didn't say so at these two EEC meetings.
Well, we had meetings here where we had to discuss this question, and I think the question was fully aired. You knew exactly what I said, knew exactly what I meant, and you chose not to answer what... And I just said, okay, I said, that's she.
Just to clarify, you didn't say that at this meeting, but for me, I never transported or colported, or however you want to mention it, that in the world. That's not my style. Otherwise, you would not have worked with me for many years, and the same for Helga. What I discussed and what you discussed with me, I kept. And so what was discussed here at the meeting and what was your position at this meeting here, I said in the local. And I think everybody who was at this EEC meeting said. And with that, this chapter was closed.
What I say,
so I don't know what
Renata, they don't, I would tell you frankly, when my encounters with people here, that they really are mystified by what the issues are. And we had some discussions, but they were mystified by them. So therefore, this fact that it is not clear what the issues are, and they weren't made clear, I tried to get them clear, but what you had is it dealt into a bunch of shouting sessions. And there was no serious attempt, even though I wanted the attempt, there was no serious attempt to have a systemic discussion of the issues. The issues are extremely important. Look, the issue is very simple. Let's say it here, and it should be said. There's one primary issue here. It's called the Fernando issue. And to go through something that we had in a certain meeting, which you may remember we talked to last time, right? Meeting in the library. The issue was Ed Spanos at that point. That Ed was Helga's enemy, and Ed was controlling certain parts of the U.S. organization. And my fear was that he would use, and I knew he was trying to do it, and he did try to do it, that I wanted her protected from Ed. And that was the meeting of the meeting of the library, where we met with the attorney, where I wrote the letter. I knew Fernando was sick at that point. But you remember the number of people going to prison. And therefore, in that situation, I had to have some degree of security for Helga, because I knew that as long as Ed was going to do what he was going to do, it was a danger to Helga. And I wouldn't be in a position to deal with it. All right, so therefore, but then the following year, in 1990, Fernando came out and openly announced, and it was published in our publications, in the EIR, for example, what he said. So that everybody here should have known it, because it was in the press, it was in the EIR, it was discussed repeatedly. Fernando was a Nazi. He had gone over to the other side. Probably before then, I didn't know it. But in 1990, he, Webster Tarpley, and others made a presentation at a conference which was a piece of filth. And it affected things here. It had to. Now, this has been the issue here. Because the issue has been that somehow this was only a U.S. problem, it wasn't a Germany problem, it was a problem all over the place. I mean, Uber was in the United States a good deal of the time during that period, back and forth. Everybody, you were there. Dina was there. You all saw ramifications of it. It stunk. The organization was almost destroyed because Fernando was an agent, he made no secret of it, of Néstor Sánchez. Néstor Sánchez is the CIA guy with Bush who was running the death squads in Central America. And Fernando bragged about it. That's why the Italian organization was broken up. Because he had a tremendous fight with Fiorella when she came back from visiting me in prison. And she came back to Germany, Italy, and said, Fernando says we're supporting the death squads. And people in Italy refused to believe it. So therefore, she was attacked by them. And they went to certain church circles in the Catholic Church who were right-wing and sympathetic. And we lost most of the organization in Italy because people refused to believe Fiorella. She ran away in disgust and said, if we're supporting Fernando, then she's not part of our organization. And Fernando was supporting the death squads. Fernando's whole faction of the organization, that section of the Catholic Church we booted out of the organization, were all Nazis. And there's a section of the Catholic Church which is Nazi. This is the part that's tied to Chile, tied to the Pinochet thing. This is what Felix Rohatyn represents. Felix Rohatyn was the funder, the official funder to put Pinochet, the Nazi, into power in Chile. When we had a problem, when I got out of prison, it was done by the president, Clinton. And the understanding was that I was the only one, through Debbie, to have access to him. Because he knew how polluted our organization was, including Fernando. And Fernando was a specific subject of that. I mean, you have a guy in our organization who's still in the organization then, who's a Nazi. He's a Nazi throughout the hemisphere. The whole organization he's tied with is the Nazi organization. The Syndicus International is a Nazi organization. It's a Nazi organization in France today. The French government is practically a Syndicus nest. You have laissez-faire. You have the banks here in Germany who are contaminated by the French banks. They're Nazis. They're the real Nazis, not the poor fools in uniform who were thrown away later, but the ones who were there and kept their money. After Germany was crushed, these guys took their money. Why did they get their money? 1931, Bank for International Settlements. The German war debt, war reparations debt, was assigned to the communities, the communes. Large corporations stepped in and bought and took over responsibility for the communities. Then the large corporations sold bonds, or bought bonds, from the Syndicus, who had owned Hermann Goering. The Goering-Wecker was owned by the French Syndicus. And when Goering went down, they still owned the interests. This is the kind of problem we have. This crowd is still there. This is our enemy. And to the extent that you don't fight the enemy, he owns you. And I couldn't get rid of this Fernando organization until I was off paper. So I'm sitting even out of prison, and I've got a Nazi and his cohorts are controlling the organization. And naturally, I moved to clean the mess up. And when I raised the question, people here boo. because I was attacking Fernando. And then when we raise the issue, Uwe objects to my doing this. People say it's not true. They lied. Fernando's a Nazi and everybody here knew it. And the church circles he's associated with are Nazis and everybody here knew it. It's the biggest single force of corruption in our organization is the fact we had to put up with that crap. And the fact that we tend to deny it today is corruption. That's what the only issue was. Other things that were discussed came up only in that question. And the fact that this thing was still sticking in the craw of the organization is not every member of the... No. You know what this is about. Dino knew what it was about. You were there. That was the issue. But some people didn't want that issue raised here. And some people in the leadership blocked against me on that question. Whether they agreed with Uwe or not, they blocked with him on it. And that's the issue. And that's what most members don't know, that that's the issue. And that's the only significant issue that I know of. But that issue not resolved is like a cancer eating at the inside of the organization. Now you know that. That's the issue. You were there.
But that was never an issue between you and me and you.
It was in the issue in the meeting. When the issue came up in discussion.
Okay, now you get the explanation at Funhouse. Okay. But,
No. At the meeting with you, that's what I said. Remember, we had this meeting in the library. You referred to the meeting in the library. That was the issue of discussion.
But Lynn, referring back to these EEC meetings, the issues from our side was a totally different issue. And it was exactly coming back to what you said today. Either the organization comes back to an open discussion, even if one opposes you on certain questions. I think the organization has to have the freedom to say, maybe, not in method. Nobody, I think, would ever oppose you in method. But how to transform something, maybe there are better ways. Or one agrees in the discussion with you that your way is the best. And that was the discussion.
No, it was not discussion. It was not.
At least, Lynn, at least from Dino's and my side, whatever
Well,
everybody else, I don't want
I
to
can't
discuss,
read
but
you.
you refer to these 2 EC meetings. And the question is, and that I think is the question for the organization today.
That's the only. No, Renata, don't change the subject. That's the only question. What was discussed at that meeting was discussed at the meeting.
Well, my relation to Fernando and Helga, you know, when I went to Fernando, it was with you too. The only time I met Fernando alone, he gave me a big ear on Schiller, on Don Carlos.
I know.
Yeah, okay, and I thought the guy is crazy. He wanted to destroy our work on Schiller, on the basis that Schiller hated the Habsburg. That was enough for me. So, that was my relation.
But
Lynn,
that was never the problem. That is not the problem. The problem is very
I
simple.
know what you say about Fernando.
No, that's not the problem. The problem is that when the issue was raised here, there was a big screaming matches. You were involved in some of them. The screaming matches were to deny the significance of the Fernando question. Period. That was the only. That was the discussion at the only meetings I was at.
No, at the 2 EC meetings, the discussion we had from our side was that it is always difficult in the organization.
No, that was not. Renata, it's not true. Look, what discussion?
Why can't I finish my sentence?
No, wait a minute. It's not true. Why do we? It's a filibuster. Look, stick to what was the issue at the meeting. The issue at the meeting is clear. Don't interpret it into something else it wasn't. Very simply, the issue was raised on the Fernando question.
Right. But
Period.
on a very specific thing.
No, specific
I
issue.
don't even want to
The
mention
specific. No, you're wrong. The specific issue was mentioned. It was clear. I said it very good. The Nazi. That was the issue.
Yes, but Lynn.
There's no yes, but that was it.
The
Nazi.
issue we raised was, and that comes back to the organization today. Either we can discuss something.
That's not the problem. It is a problem. It's a problem in the sense that as long as you have a group organization in the organization and you have a structured relationship, you're going to have problems. So just cut out the structure. Cut out the group rule. Nobody gives orders on who can talk to who. Right? An honest, open organization. The problem here is very simple. The problem was that when I raised the issue of Fernando, Uwe went berserk over it.
When did I go berserk?
Oh, you got everybody. You were screaming about this damn thing.
And I objected to one thing, that you simply lumped me in with Fernando.
I didn't lump you in, Fernando. No, I didn't lump you in. I lumped you in one thing, is that when we were discussing and presenting to the membership through the briefing, we're reporting on exactly what was going on because we were cleaning out a nest in the U.S. And there were objections to that. One of the strongest advocates was, of course, Michel. And Michel and others began a screaming fit about this thing. When I talked about the corruption in the U.S. organization and here, I came back to a screaming fit on this same issue. And the same problem. The problem was, the point is that this issue, the point is we were taken over, in a sense, by an intelligence operation which was Nazi connected. And when I raised the question, there was a fuss about it. That's all it was ever about. Everything else is simply derivative of that.
Lynn, on that I totally agree. But if we come back to the organization today, and if we look to the history of the organization, then one has to see that sometimes the heroes were built up and nobody dared to oppose it.
Oh,
Maybe
no.
because out of cowardness or whatever.
No, you didn't. No, you never. It was never opposed. All this discussion was never opposed by me anywhere.
Well, at the LIVE conference, Elizabeth was there, Dino was there, Jonathan was there, and they intervened. They opposed the Fernando crew from Argentina and so on, at least some of the Europeans. That I know for sure.
I know this.
And Lynn, I know
But you're changing and shifting ground. Focus on the issue. The issue was, this happened. That, for example, Dino, in the second time this thing came up in a discussion, the first time it came up, Dino said this absolute piece of nonsense. The nonsense was, that the problem was there was only one issue in the United States organization between the Fernando and Goldstein. The issue that we were dealing with was the fact is that the Fernando issue and its implications, and the fact that people here would say, no, we're tired of the Fernando issue. Don't discuss it. Don't raise it. We don't agree. And then I come back and I got, a screaming match about about my cleaning out the organization of Fernando's cohorts from the Catholic Church. And that was a fit. Now what happened is you got a phenomenon where people would come in and come groupthink. Where you would have a group of the leadership would come in with a groupthink operation against Helga or against me, which is what I experienced. Now, whether you were in the groupthink or not, and I think the whole meeting was groupthink. I don't think that any of the leadership that were opposing me in those 2 meetings or 3 meetings was thinking clearly. It was groupthink. We go into a meeting, we're prepared to say the following party line. Because what was being said was false. What the issue was being raised was false. It was a goddamn lie, in point of fact. And that was the problem.
Lynn, may I ask you, who was doing right? I mean, in this period, because
that's not a problem. A lot of people doing right. A lot of people
was she doing right by dropping out because she was right in her opposition to the other people in Italy, or were we right in Sweden when we isolated ourselves from the rest of the organization to kind of? We made a protest against this.
Those things are not important.
Statements of another.
They're of no significance. Those kinds of things are no significance. Because frictional things are not. Don't try to think something important out of frictional things. Who cares? Much of this stuff you don't care. It doesn't mean anything. It's not worth talking about. You may talk about it from the standpoint of practical standpoint, but it's not important. Mistakes are made. We've been so right in general in what we've done that any question of mistakes is rather silly. The problem is that when you get this kind of thing, look, you have a tendency in the organization to function as untransparent, to function along business lines. And as I said today, don't come in and say, we're going to run this by business principles. Don't say that. Because that's what the killer is. That's what's killing us. This is a stultified organization. the vigorous kind of discussion of ideas that used to occur doesn't occur anymore. And this was the change. But the issue came up, the issue of these fights came up on this issue of Fernando. They started in 1999 and 2000 on the issue of Fernando. They came up here. They involved screaming sessions. I don't mean discussions, screaming sessions. And I don't accept the screaming session as a discussion.
Yeah, but the thing what we tried to do in this period with Fernando, we disagreed with the concept, but then we tried to do a decent job by being in the organization.
Don't worry about it.
And trusting the leadership that they were dealing with it somehow, and then we just kept on
look at it.
A job, but not really
From 1989, I was in prison. I didn't get free from this until 1999, the control. The organization was in the hands of others. The hands of others included enemies, as well as fools. Look, who supported Fernando at the conference in where he announced his Nazism in September of 1990? Who was it? Who backed him up? Webster Topley. Webster Topley gave the accompanying speech defending Fernando.
And he was in the leadership of the organization.
What?
He was in the leadership of the organization.
Absolutely. Who backed him up when Graham Lowry attacked Fernando as being incompetent for that speech? Mel Knessy said, "Shut up and sit down." And then they had a special meeting and they threw Graham out of the national leadership. When Tony Chaikin raised a question, objection to Fernando's fraud, similar treatment. The entire organization consented at that point. When they destroyed the sales organization and went on with this crazy business-like sales organization, which they went into, and shut down the field and shut off the exposure, what could I do about it? Oh, you're in Sweden, you're seeing this spectacle and going, what can you do about it? Who's going to blame anybody? The government had intervened to try to destroy me and destroy this organization. And you get casualties, you get problems. The fact that you get casualties and problems is not itself a moral issue. The moral issue only is what the enemy did to you. So don't worry about it. The important thing is this, because this question is clear. I mean, here you had the biggest problem we have, the biggest stain we have in our existence is Fernando Quijano. That this organization, from the time I went to prison, especially the following year, until I was off paper, was under his control. That the fact that the way the accounting was done, financial accounting done, was fraudulent. Linda de Hoyos, who was preparing the reports, had no figures, except the back checkbook figures. She made up the figures. The reports of various organizations produced under her direction were fraudulent. The mismanagement of the print shop, and fraudulent. What was done in the finances, largely fraudulent. Who's responsible? It happened to us because enemy agents were controlling the organization. And the key issue here was we had to clean the nest out. I only dumped, apart from individual agents, I only chased people out of the organization once. Only once. In all the history of our organization. And that was in the Fernando connection.
But then you may have noticed these are all people like Warren, Klenetsky, Webster-Tapley.
What?
Those who left in the process of discussing the Fernando issue and the entire life.
Well, they were all part
Now,
of it.
none of us here, and we discussed it many, many times, had any direct dealing with Fernando. And you know that.
I know that, but to make a difference. That's not the issue. Elizabeth, it's irrelevant.
Yeah, okay.
But the fact is, when I raise the Fernando issue here, then that's what the problem is.
You were correct to raise it. But none of us had anything to do with him.
No, there is a problem. The problem is the organization was being controlled by Fernando. Linda de Hoyos was part of it. She's also another skunk.
Yeah, she left,
Sure, she left.
of course,
Why'd she leave?
because she was corrupt.
No, she left. She'd been corrupt for a long time. That's not why she left.
No, but I only raise it as a real, I mean, you have
The real issue is the real issue that you have is in any operation where the enemy is coming after you, he'll find weak people who are corrupt and corruptible, and he will corrupt them. All right. Well, I've seen people corrupted often, and I take no blame for that.
But I think that the real issue is that the organization is not functioning. That the leadership is not functioning, that the locals are not on the best level where we could be. This is the issue.
Ja,
And if somebody...
man muss die Kirche auch im Dorf lassen, wie man in Deutschland sagt. So I think if you look at the, especially the last couple of weeks, we have handled significant problems financially. I mean, I think our efforts clearly are that the youth deployment and the functioning of this has a priority. We have discussed it often again and again. We have managed, for example, to gradually take care of two big campaign debts. One is from the Ruhr. At the end of last year, we had about 10,000 there, which gradually we have worked down. We have in the last couple of weeks managed also to eliminate other campaign debt from the European election campaign, from the printers' debt from the Bundestagswahl. We have managed to help get the new car. We have printed the 100,000 pamphlets. So I think it is not quite as bad, and I think we discussed after this conference call, we did discuss the quotas, which said Munich 9, Hessen 9, Ruhr 9, Hannover 6, Berlin 4, and Dresden 3, and the locals, which is closest to it is Hessen, the second closest to the quota is the Ruhr, the furthest away from the 9,000 quota is Munich, and then Hannover is struggling with the 6, and we have the province. Berlin is not at that level, but I think Dresden is close to 2,000, 3,000. So I think a blank statement that all our fundraising is dysfunctional is just not what the reality is. Plus, in terms of what the debate sometimes is, in terms of payments, we also do have to take into account legal considerations. I mean, there are certain, if we don't hit the 60,000 level, or the way it translates, we lack approximately 10,000 cash flow every month from the Büsel campaign to take care of these projects. But there come points where, for example, from the area of either campaign debt or especially social security payments, there are legal problems involved. At a certain point, you cannot say, no, our social security we will not pay. And it is that balancing act, which I think, and in that sense, I don't think we operate on business. I think we have quite successfully done in bookkeeping exactly what you said.
No, pardon me. That's not the point. The problem is the systemic problem is twofold. First of all, there is a misconception in methods here on how to handle these kinds of problems, not in terms of paying bills and so on. That's not the problem. The problem is the lack of money, income. That's your problem. And the problem is a systemic problem. It is not, shall we just try? The point is, look, when we virtually doubled the income in the U.S., it wasn't that we weren't trying. We were trying. We were failing. And therefore the problem here is, it means when you're trying but failing, it means there's something wrong with your method. Now, you're not going to meet your quotas at all, whatever your quotas are, unless you have a method that will succeed in doing that. My point today is that your method won't do it. But you're
What's wrong in what the phone teams are doing?
Obviously, I'm not there, so I know there are a lot of things wrong, because I know how things work. I know how to manage things. I know these things. Look, I was doing this before you were born. So I'm not unfamiliar with these questions. The problem here is systemic. That the political mobilization, the political orientation, which could succeed, is not succeeding because of systemic problems. Now, trying is not it. That's for idiots to believe in. Everybody who's failed while trying has failed. And the problem is the way they tried. There was either something wrong they were doing or something they should have been doing that they weren't doing. And I'm saying that the understanding of the significance of the political campaign orientation is not adequately understood here. And the idea of how the youth movement must be oriented and how it's oriented to the youth movement is not adequately understood here.
But if Hessen, for example, comes closest to the quota week after week now for some time and sends most of the money in and is the bedrock for our capability of pay certain
Well, I would say there's a big question. There's a question, of course, how the phone teams are working,
they are doing wrong,
or how the phone teams are assigned, what they're assigned to do. I could determine which will succeed and which not by deciding who's going to be on what phone team in what region. It's that simple. The question is the systemic problem you have to look at. You probably here you are getting half of what you should be getting, just by the efforts you have.
Yeah, but the problem is called new contacts.
The problem is called inspiration, ideas, concepts. There's a unified thing, and that is just not there. I'm sorry. The inspiration is not there. Every region is doing its own thing. It's becoming better. It's becoming better. But as long as we have this kind of, there's a phone teams. They are doing this and that, and there's not a real concerted discussion about the where we are going, what are the priorities in terms of the strategy.
But look, this is not true in this case. I can only tell. We had this very serious Berlin campaign, and we take it serious. And we said it's better to go, to the locality, to see what's going on, to get an idea what is the campaign, to have a better angle, to brief the people what we are doing, in this fight. And so two of us, we made the first step, and last week we had two other phone team organizers who went there. So we have the list until September. We are from every phone team organizer, included the North, who are going to Berlin and will support the campaign and to see how we can improve the potential we have, because it's clear where we have the biggest field organizing. That means Leipzig and Berlin. We have the most people in the field. In every other region, and this must be clear, we have 3 people in the field, and we have 2 people on the phone. That's the situation. And we have one person who are doing institutional work. That's the reality. So we have no people who are blocking on everything. We have only field operation. We have no bowling anymore. So we are out there. And so, okay, that's the point. So we have Leipzig and we have Berlin. And we have to think about how we can really
that's relevant, Barbara. It's a relevant aspect of it.
Yeah, we have to take this potential. So we have a real field organizer, but we have no functioning phone team. Not in my preparation, but we have no functioning phone teams, where we have the most people on the field.
Exactly.
We generate the most impact.
Exactly.
And this is a problem. And we are trying, because we got the picture, when we were there and we discussed and we went out in the field with the youth also a little bit. So we get an idea and we brief people really serious. So they have to change Germany to what we are doing in the capital.
Exactly.
That's our policy.
It's obvious as hell. First, just tell me a very crude thing, because you know this thing. You saw it yourself. Right. It's obvious as hell that the center of Germany in terms of fundraising and everything else, is Berlin. If you're not in Berlin, you're not in Germany. And if you don't have your concentration of your activity in Berlin, you're not realistic. Therefore, the point is not having a shift of weight to Berlin, which is where the great potential exists, for income and everything else. You're not realizing your best market. And that has been my view of the thing for the past 5 years, 5, 6 years. The move to Berlin, the move of the shift to Berlin, had to be crucial. Because that's where the potential is. You've got about 4 million population. You've got some sections of fairly wealthy sections in Berlin. It's the center of Germany, and you are totally understaffed in Berlin. You should have the full equivalent of a phone team there. You've got the youth operation. You've got a campaign going, election campaign going, which can be built up. You can raise more money there. Right on this, because you have to have a certain integration between the area in which you're doing the work and where you are. And therefore, to shift some of the strength, or even by rotating, as you did, rotating for periods of time, people from other regions into Berlin, you develop new potentials. The problem is you have to get away from this pessimism. Remember, I've been through this with the U.S., which I mentioned today, the key thing I mentioned. I've been through this. I've been through the whole business. We've been through it for a long time to try to clean up the best of the United States. You realize Philadelphia was sitting there in recent period had developed a potential which was only half of what it had. And when Steve and others realized they had the potential, they doubled the income. They only doubled the income in a week, but they sustained it in successive weeks. In the meantime, this helped in the process where we're trying to get Baltimore has suddenly greatly increased its performance. Chicago is coming out of the woods. And California is almost declared freedom from Khrushchev right now. So the point is, the problem here is not to say we're trying hard. That doesn't butter any beans. The point is, are we successful? And Uber says we're not successful. I agree. So therefore,
It's not quite a disaster.
I'm glad to hear that. I want to be sure that's a statement.
know that we discussed it all.
Oh, I know. Come on, we got. But the point is we've got to make a change. First of all, get away from this idea of a structure of the organization. Eliminate it. Number one. Number two, open discussion across regions among people. Because this is a political organization and broad participation in discussion among all parts of the organization is essential. Otherwise, you don't have a political organization. You have a sect, and you don't want that. You don't want people shutting people up in terms of the access to the process of deliberation. You want an open organization. You don't want to try to bully people by screaming at them or threatening them to get them to do something. You try to inspire them. And you try to get some ideas going. What you're doing is you're creating a sectarian, a stinking environment. A stinking emotional environment. It's filled with hate and resentment and cursing and all kinds of things among the boomers. We got the same thing, in the U.S. We got experience with it. Don't tell me that this is something that's not here. It's just a little worse here, that's all. Because you haven't cleaned it up, that's all. And you can clean it up. First of all, the fear of campaign. Look, you've got people in this organization that are frightened.